Do you like Photoshop? I do too, but there are things that drive me crazy, which is why today I'm going to share with you 10 things I hate about Photoshop. No bugs, that would be too easy. Instead, what follows are deliberate features, some very old, but most quite new, designed by people who clearly don't use the software. Hot dog, my blood's a boiling. Let's get started. All right, this is the countdown, so let's start with number 10, ostensibly, of the 10 things that I hate about Photoshop. This is actually a really juicy one. In fact, this is the one that inspired me to create the list in the first place, the alternate glyphs pop-up panel. It doesn't just show up in Photoshop. This horrible feature shows up in multiple Adobe programs. So let's say you're just like, doo-dee-doo, I'm going to select the type tool on my merry adventure through Photoshop, and I'll just go ahead and select the letter A right there. And up comes this helpful pop-up glyphs panel thing. And now I'm like, okay, I'll change it to a superscript A. Oh, and I'll hover over it. Oh, I'll go with the small caps A. And then you get a totally different group of things you can select, like a capital superscript, or my goodness, just a capital letter, or I'll click on this arrowhead right here to bring up the glyphs panel, all of which I don't want to do. Nobody does, by the way. This is nuts. This is a horrible feature. I'm going to press the escape key. I now have a capital A, which I did not want, so I'll undo that. Now, what I just showed you, that was the good version of this feature. Check it. I'm going to double click on the word alternate. Notice that there's a big glumping underline thing under the capital A. If I move over there, oh my gosh, and I'm not paying attention. Of course, who is? And you just start typing some new text. I want to replace this text. Can you hear me typing? I'll type harder and louder so you can hear that. I'm not doing anything. And that's because it's stuck. The program is stuck on the crappiest feature anybody's ever invented. I swear to you. What is it doing here? And so you can move your cursor away. This way. Yes, move it away this way. But if you move it back, oh my God, it comes up again. What is wrong? I'll press the escape key. I'll press the escape key twice in a row. That's what you have to do. Twice in a row right now. That's what you have to do in order. Oh, it came back. And then now, well, once you get it to go away, escape. Okay, that got me out. That's nice. All right, all I want to do, move away. I gotta move away to the left. What? I just want to enter something else, just anything is what I want to do. Anyway, thank you I told you, these are on purpose features here. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. All right, I think this is a good one. We're still working with type, by the way, for number 9. When formatting, children, remember this one, enter, then escape. Makes sense, right? Well, just watch. I'll press the T key this time to switch to the type tool. And what I want to do is select this entire line of type by triple clicking on it. Uh-oh, that got in the way again because I'm near the letter T. So I could only double click before my third click got interrupted. Thank you very much. That's a great feature. All right, triple click and I get the entire thing as long as I stay away from that thickly underlined. You know what? No matter how many underlines you put under it, Adobe, I'm not paying any attention to that. Anyway, watch this. Let's say I want to change the type size. You know that trick from the keyboard, right? Where you can press imagine what I want to do is just kind of nudge my way down to 120. See that it's 160 up here in the options bar right now? Okay, that's just kind of the goal. Well, I can do that kind of control shift. That'd be command shift on the Mac. Less than sign thing. So comma, it's the comma key. Like it's just, I used to think, oh, what a fun trick. Now I think it's just like, I'm not even bothering with it mentally. Look up there. I went from, let me go back up. Let me see if I can. I'll go back up. It was 121 and then it went down to, I accidentally hit the wrong thing into the strike through. Beautiful. And then I think I hit the slash key. Interesting because it's right next door. Right. All these muddled shortcuts that just anymore. It's just like, nah. All right, so I just really ruined that text. So I'll just press the escape key to accept what I've done. After all, that's what I want. And so then I'll press Control-C, Command-C on the Mac to undo. All right, let's try again. I'm going to select the entire line of text by triple clicking on it. Then I'll click up here in the type size value, font size if you prefer, up here in the options bar. And then I'll press shift down arrow like so until I get to 120. I can preview that on the fly. And so I think, okay, I'll accept that value. Of course, you press the enter key, right, to accept the value. Then you got to press the enter key again to accept your changes to the type. Enter, enter. You do that, you do change the type size of the type that no longer exists anymore because you replaced it with the carriage return. Oh, that's right, because, yeah, okay, that makes sense, right? Because enter or return makes a carriage return. All right. So undo, all right, and then escape. Now escape. So just press a random sequence of keys and, Bob's your uncle, you got it. All right, undo that. That's, who's the... Triple click again, not on the T this time around. Go up to the point size value. I'll call it this time. Press shift down arrow a bunch of times. And then it's like, okay, I learned my lesson, right? Can't press enter, enter. Escape key. It's the escape key that commits. That doesn't make any sense. Never has, by the way, Adobe. Hitting escape doesn't commit to things. It escapes. But anyway, whatever. So that means I can hit the escape key twice in a row. Got to do something twice in a row, right? Escape, escape. Okay, well, I just abandoned my change to the type size value because I hit the escape key, and then I accepted my abandonment by hitting the escape key again. Yeah, that makes no sense. None whatsoever. Triple click on this line again. Do the same thing. Here's what you got to do. And this is just mind-numbing, in my opinion. Press shift down arrow until you get the type size value where you want it to be. This has stung me so many times I can't even... Oh, here we go. Here's what you really do. Press the enter key to accept the change to that value, then press the escape key. Yeah, that's it. Right there. There it is. Enter, then escape. Remember that one because after all, it makes no sense at all. It's fun to hate on stuff, right? Even stuff we love. What is wrong with us? Okay, not you. You're fine. I got a lot of issues. 10 is a lot. But hey, want one more? This is a good one. And if you followed my advice, you won't have to buy another hard drive this summer. For more information, go to patreon.com/Deke now. And now, back on the hate train. All right, now this one is so petty on my part, but it's grating. The modernized eraser tool icon. So a few years ago, Adobe went flat. Like the design, every tool, well, not every tool, I'll show you in a second, but all the tools went flat because it was all the rage at the time, right? So we used to have this eraser tool icon that was really identifiable. I'll show you in a moment, that is. And now it looks like this thing right here. Which, okay, let's just sort of pick it apart for a moment here. Here's the old eraser, which was shaded and pretty and pink pearl and so immediately identifiable. Maybe that's not your favorite eraser because it leaves pink shards all over the place. And you like those more modern erasers inside the sleeves and everything, but you can tell what that is. You can't tell what this is. So this is the shaded design. This is the flat design of the last few years. And I'll tell you why even the folks who made this darn icon know that this isn't an identifiable icon. It's because, check it out, I'll click and hold on this guy right here in order to bring up the other erasers. We got the background eraser and the magic eraser. The background eraser's got a pair of scissors with the eraser and then the sparkles for magic. They're both terrible tools, but my point is they're not worthy of an item on this list. But here's my point. They don't have surfaces on them. They don't have a horizontal line indicating the surface along which you're erasing, where the eraser tool does, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And even with that, it doesn't make any sense. And by the way, it's the only tool that acknowledges its surface in this way. It's terrible. All right, so let's say, for example, let's say it's one of those erasers that's in a sleeve. All right, so I just want to imagine, was that a good idea at all? So even if we had dimensional tool icons, so this is the ancient one, we got rid of the gradients, but it's still very recognizable. And this is the one that's up to date now that it's coming out of a sleeve and it's got that worn edge on it per the instructions implied by this guy right here. Well, wait. These would be dimensional. These would have dimension. They'd be isometric, right? That's not, none of these tools are isometric, right? They're all flat. Click and hold on the dodge tool right there. Bring it back up. Come on. And you can see right there the sponge tool. The sponge tool is an isometric icon. That was allowed. Very complicated one too, with a bunch of holes all over the place, thereby indicating it's kind of a loofah. I just want to acknowledge, I just want to spend a long time looking at the sponge tool because that's identifiable, even though you don't use it nearly as much as the eraser tool, which is hard to recognize what it is. Now, let's just take a tip from Illustrator for a second, why don't we? Here's the Photoshop eraser. This is the Illustrator eraser. At least it's like doesn't need a surface to erase upon. And by the way, it's got its sleeve, right? So you can see that the sleeve is bigger than the eraser. So at least you go, oh yeah, okay, I get it. That's an eraser, even though you don't use the eraser inside Illustrator much at all. And so I just want to make it clear. We had a great eraser icon. Now we don't. It wasn't broken. Now it's fixed. At number 7, I have dusty old filters. And in case you're thinking, you're a dusty old filter, Deke, you watch that. Stow that right now. Now, in many cases, as you can see, I have low res in parentheses. That's because in many cases, these filters were designed for low res images. And so, for example, I'll open this image called modest resolution right here. And I don't mean 300 ppi versus 72 ppi or something like that. It doesn't matter the print resolution. I'm talking about how many pixels exist inside this image. And notice in the bottom right corner, we're seeing the image at 50%. So we're only seeing, for every screen pixel, we're seeing 4 image pixels all told. And so that's not high res, it's just modest, right? But if I go to the filter menu, choose sharpen, for example, and choose sharpen, because I want to sharpen the image, right? Watch it very closely. And no, didn't really see much of anything happen, did you? And that's the problem with this is, like, especially if you're a new user, you come to the software, you play with the filters, right? Because they're so enticing. But then very shortly after a couple of hours of this kind of stuff, you're like, I guess they all suck. But that's not the case. It's just that some of them do. Anyway, I'll undo that change, go to the filter menu and choose sharpen. And of course, try sharpen more. And there, did you see that? That kind of registered, right? This is before, this is after. But only barely is there any difference. All right, I'll undo that change because I don't want things building up. I'll switch to screen res. Again, not 300 versus 72 ppi, nothing like that. Just down here in the bottom left corner, we're seeing the image at 100%. So 1 image pixel for every screen pixel. So we're seeing all the pixels that we're going to see. Return to the filter menu, choose sharpen, and watch closely, and you'll see a little bit of a difference. And this was the idea back then. This is what this was for. You were going to see all the pixels at a time, and you were going to be able to sharpen them ever so slightly, just if you wanted to work very quickly. Undo, and then if you thought, well, I want to sharpen more, then you choose that. Never mind, sharpen edge is also bad, but I'll just go ahead and choose sharpen more. You can see it, right? More clearly, more distinctly. It's over sharpening, but still, there it is. All right, here's a really great one for demonstrating resolution. Go to the filter menu, choose pixelate. So I'm back in the modest resolution image and choose facet. And no, didn't see anything occur. Maybe just a little bit. This is before. Nah, I'm not even going to bother with after. I'll go to screen res so you can see. I'll go just choose that first command now to repeat the last filter. And this time you can see it kind of goop things up. So it kind of creates these mottled edges, which is kind of interesting given that that's all the filter does. Like there's no ... there's no controls, there's no dialog box, but not that interesting, right? Here's a really great one. I'll undo that, go to the filter menu, choose pixelate once again and choose fragment. The make you ill filter, or makes it look like you're feeling very ill, right before the blackout occurs. And so that could be modestly interesting if it was a motion effect, but it's not. This is Photoshop. So I'll undo that change. Here's the worst. This is just my favorite worst filter. I'll go to the filter menu. I'm back in the modest resolution image. It doesn't actually, you know what? I'll go back to this guy, screen res. It just doesn't matter. It's not a resolution dependent filter, but that's what I'm going to do. Stylize, solarize, right there on the surface of the sun. Holy moly, this is going to be cool. No ... And we get this. We'll go over to the channels panel so we can see. We've just destroyed the image, really, is what we've done. I guess it's charred. That's what's so solarized about it. We used to have all these bright, cheerful pixels going on in the channels, and now just life has been robbed from them. And let me show you what's going on, basically. I'll go to the modest resolution image. It doesn't matter. This is not resolution dependent, that is. Go to image mode, good old curves. Not my favorite. I prefer levels a lot, but, a lot of people love the curves, but that's for a different day. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab this guy right here, this final point right here, and take him all the way down. Then that just crushed everything. We just have black left. And then I'll click in the center and take it up. Now, that'd be cool. No, it wouldn't actually be cool at all. It's still dumb. But you could do that if you wanted this kind of effect. But that would make the midpoint, right, all crazy bright. But that's not what it does. That's too much. That's too much. You take it down to about half mast right there so that we don't get too bright. And then I'll click OK. And that just, of course, that's something you would never do in a million years. Maybe the millionth year, depending on your mood. But that's what happens here. And so it's even worse. Actually, the actual effect is even worse. So what I've done is I've put together a list of filters because I want to be a productive guy. I want to be a team player. And so my dusty dozen right here, under the blur menu, blur and blur more. They're just like sharpen and sharpen more. You can't even see them. Distort shear, just an old filter. We have warps nowadays, so we don't need this. Pixelate, fasten, and fragment. I showed you those. Sharpen edges, sharpen more. All three of those. Stylize, solarize. Video, deinterlace, and NTSC colors. Just really super ridiculously old. And other HSB, HSL. Well, why don't I just show you that really quick? I'll undo that change, that last change, and I'll go up to the filter menu, choose other, and choose HSB, hue, saturation, brightness, HSL. I think it was hue, saturation, lightness. This is way long time ago. And there used to be modes built around one of these. I can't remember which. Now we just have RGB and CMYK and stuff. So anyway, there's no ... but it still brings up a dialog box where you can change your parameters. So I'll take my RGB values. They're no good to me anymore, and I'll convert them to HSL. Let's see how that works for me, and click OK. Now, there are no HSL channels. We're still working in RGB, but this is what it would look like if you were to do such a thing. So I stand by the idea that we should get rid of that filter as well. And just imagine if we got rid of just those 12 filters, we would still have an extremely robust filter menu with all kinds of commands. At number 6, we have the frame tool, or as I like to call it, the lame tool. Hot Lemme. I actually have serious issues with this tool, as you're about to see. Starts small and builds up quite nicely, I think. All right, so let's say I'm a web designer, and I'm trying to create a mock-up, and I want to import an image, place an image inside of a frame, inside a container. Now, you can do that. There's myriad ways to do that, as we'll see. But, because we didn't have a frame drawing tool, let's have one just to make things simple. This is anything but simple, but I'll grab the frame tool. And I can select from two kinds of frames, rectangular, or I can draw an elliptical one. And what I can't do is click. I can't click to specify an exact size, which I should be able to do, but that's like an error of omission, right? So I'll just go ahead and draw a frame freeform. And I could set up some guides in advance and that kind of stuff, but I drew a frame. Now, we have a frame object over here in the layers panel. Back to that in just a moment. And now I'll go up to the file menu and choose either of the place commands. Place embedded, place link, doesn't matter. And I'll grab myself an image. This guy will do just fine. And I'll click place, and it places inside the frame. A few things happen. Not only does its size, Photoshop automatically scales it to fit the frame. And it is, fit the width in this case because the frame's a little taller or something like that. It doesn't want to crop anything. It wants to scale it in there. And it does so non-destructively by first converting the image to a smart object. So if I press Control-T or Command-T on the Mac to enter the free transform mode, I can see that it's scaled to 22%. So it's all non-destructive. Yay, what a great tool. Everybody in the audience claps because it demos very well. But that's just the tip. All right, few things about this. First of all, its display is totally different. Its organization totally different than the other tools, the other things inside Photoshop. We're basically here. Let me show you. I'll double click on this guy for a second, and I'll click on a frame, and I'll drag it around. You can see it's masking, right? It's cropping on the fly. And that's fine. And then if I want to move the entire object, I double click again and drag it around. But nowhere else in Photoshop is the mask on the left-hand side and the object that's being masked on the right-hand side. That's just a violation of how everything in Photoshop has worked for years and years, decades, right? I have an issue with that. Also, though, I'm just going to, it doesn't play well with the other tools. So if I grab the black arrow tool, for example, because after all, this is a vector-based object right here, this frame, you can't select it with the black arrow tool. You can't drag it around. It just doesn't even get along with the other vector functions inside the software. And it has nothing to do with type, by the way. It's just images. All right, so I'll get rid of that for a second. And I'll turn on this layer. And it's called documentation. And I just gave it a drop shadow just so we can see that it's on a different layer. And this is the documentation for drawing a frame over an existing image on the canvas. I want to point this out because it should be so darn easy. It's for folks who don't want to spend a lot of time using all the other hard stuff in Photoshop, right? So it says select the frame tool. That's step one. Okay, I'll select the frame tool. Then I can choose in the tool options bar. It's just the options bar. Whether I want a rectangular or elliptical frame, I already saw that. Okay, with an existing image on the canvas. What? On the canvas? In the canvas, maybe, because the canvas is the physical size of the background, by the way. And there we have it. And then out here is the pasteboard and that kind of stuff. But there's nothing on the canvas. Anyway, I'll come back to that. Draw a frame over the desired area of the image, fine. And then step 4 is in this step. I'm just mocking the documentation. When you draw the frame, that's what happens. Okay, so I'll draw the frame, right? And it goes ahead and does what we saw before with placing the flag. It goes ahead and throws the mask on the left-hand side and in violation of everything else in the software. And then it makes this a smart object, which is inherently good because then I can transform it independently and so forth. All right, I'll undo that change for reasons that will become obvious in just a moment. And I'll go over to this image. This is the flag. Once again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the flag into that composition just so we can see how it works with the flag. And so I'll right click. Well, right clicking doesn't do anything with the frame tool unless you have multiple layers selected, in which case it behaves like the move tool and it'll switch it to a different layer. It doesn't have the functionality it needs in order to work like, all right, what I want to do is just duplicate the layer. So I'll switch to the rectangular marquee tool because that's where you get all the right click goodness. Right click and there's duplicate layer. Why wasn't it there with the frame tool? It should be there with the frame tool, darn it. Anyway, choose that, and I'll change the image to simple comp because that's where it was working. I'll just go ahead and call this guy flag. And then I'll click OK, and there it is. And I'll just so it's, well, let me zoom out a little bit so you can see it's too big for the canvas, right? It doesn't fit in the canvas, but that's okay. Photoshop doesn't have an issue with this. These are known as big layers that are bigger than the canvas. And so I'll just kind of go ahead and drag this guy up here like so. All right, I want to put it in the frame, right? Just like I did with the documentation layer. So I'll go ahead and select it, and then I'll grab my frame tool. And I want you to see, notice in the layers panel, make the thumbnails nice and big so you can really see there. Flag is selected. Flag is the selected layer. Then we have a documentation layer, then the background. But the documentation layer is in back. I'll drag to draw a frame. It hit the documentation layer. It ignored the flag layer and it hit the documentation layer. That's what's meant by on the canvas. Darn thing's too big for the canvas, so it just got ignored. What? Nothing in the software works like that. That's just wrong. All right, I'll turn that layer off, by the way, so it's not even being factored in. I'll drag this down so it's below so we can see it's not on, and I'll draw a frame around it, and it just created an empty frame object. This is where I am seriously not happy with this behavior because this white right there, that's not anything. A white thumbnail in Photoshop means, and it could mean, the background is white. It could mean the layer is white. It could mean that the layer mask is currently empty, that it doesn't have anything in it, or it's white is what it really means. The filter mask is white. In this case, there's nothing. There is no content right there. Double clicking on it doesn't bring up the contents of the smart object or anything like that. This is fundamentally empty, and yet it's got a thumbnail right there. And what I can do now, on the plus side, I can drag this and drop it into there, and it becomes a smart object. And now I can hit Control T or Command T on the Mac in order to transform it without, non-destructively. And I'll just change the image size to 30%, let's say, and it fits inside the frame now. And everything is so very jolly. But it wouldn't do that a moment ago. What? All right, so let's undo. Let's undo that horrible sequence of events. And now what I'm going to do is I'll just go ahead. This is not a smart object anymore. I'll just hit Control T, Command T on the Mac, and I'll just change it to 30%. Again, hit width or height value, doesn't matter. And that's a destructive modification. I don't care. That's not the purpose of what I'm trying to show you here. And now I can draw a frame, and it'll put the object inside the frame because now it's small enough. Oh my God, I'm apoplectic here. Whereas the whole idea behind this really catastrophic feature is that it's supposed to automatically scale the thing to fit inside the frame, and so it shouldn't ignore large objects. It should accommodate them. Check this out. Undo. I just undid that. I'll select the documentation layer. The frame layer is in the background. You know it's right there. Right? I'll drag it over a little bit so we can see. It's right there. All right, so I'll do the flag layer is selected. By the way, I want you to notice that. I'll draw a frame. And it goes for the top object. It goes for the thing it sees. What are you talking about? Just idiotic tool, I swear. So fine. What's the solution, right? I'll F12. I hit the F12 key to revert this image. I'll go over here with the rectangular marquee tool selected. So I'll press the M key because frame tool isn't going to do me any good at this point. Right click, choose duplicate layer. I'm going to put it in there once again. Simple comp, call it flag once again. Same steps, right? And then I'll go into this layer and I'll go ahead and right click once again and choose convert to smart object. So I can scale this guy non-destructively, just an extra step. I know the frame tool did that for me automatically, but it didn't do almost anything else I wanted automatically. So I'll just go ahead and drag this over. Control T, Command T on the Mac in order to scale this guy. This way I can specify size numerically. And I'll go ahead and say, yeah, let's go with 30%. Let's say I want to put it inside a frame. I want to be able to crop it, right? Non-destructively on the fly. Why then I would just grab myself the rectangular marquee, the rectangle tool. Actually, the vector-based rectangle tool, right? And I could just click and specify size if I wanted to, or I can just drag because it's a good tool. And look, there it is over there. All right, I'll drag it down so that it's underneath the flag, and I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click this horizontal line in order to create a clipping group, the clipping mask, where I'm clipping the flag inside the rectangle. Great. So that's a way to work. That works perfectly fine. It's organic. It works with all the other tools, like you could grab the black arrow tool and scale it and all that kind of stuff, drag it around independently of the flag, click on the flag if you want to select it, and so forth. I'm going to go back to the rectangle layer. I'm going to press Control X, Command X on the Mac in order to cut that mask. Now just get rid of the rectangle, the thing that's called rectangle, because it's just a solid fill layer now. Now I'll select the flag. I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but instead of clicking on the Add Layer Mask icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, I'll press the Control key or the Command key on the Mac and click, and that way I have a vector-based mask, and now I'll hit Control V, Command V on the Mac, and that registers that rectangle in place, and now I have a vector-based layer mask. And notice that it's on the right-hand side with the contents of the layer here on the left-hand side, because that makes sense, and that's how everything works inside Photoshop. And that, my friends, is why I hate the frame tool. At number 5, we have Bicubic Automatic. Short story, it's a bad default setting. Longer story, it gets us into serious propeller head territory, but basically this is a combination of interpolation methods which Photoshop employs anytime you scale or rotate an image. And I'll be demonstrating with the image size command, so I'll go ahead and switch over to our familiar woodworking right here, just because it has some really great detail. Notice that we're seeing it the 50% view size, and that's because it's a fairly hefty image. It's more than 10 megapixels, so that's cool. Anyway, let's say I want to downsample it. That is, I want to reduce its size, reduce the number of pixels. That gives us a chance to clarify the remaining detail, by the way. So I'll go up to the image menu and choose the image size command. It's also great, you know, you want to make sure you have control over the resampling process so it doesn't happen in, you know, at a website, for example. So some site doesn't do it automatically for you. And so what I want to do is make sure the resample checkbox is turned on. That way I can downsample or upsample, either way. And I have my values here set to percent. So I'll change the percent value for both width and height to 50%, like we're seeing right here. Resolution doesn't matter at all. What does matter is that I'm going to increase the size of the image size dialog box so we can take a look at this preview, which is accurate when you're working with a flat image like so, which is very useful to us. And I'm going to zoom in like so. so that we can see that we're ending up with these very sharply defined edges. Now notice that the interpolation right here is set to automatic, better known as Bicubic automatic for what that's worth. However, what it's doing depends on whether I'm downsampling or upsampling. If I'm downsampling, it's automatically choosing Bicubic sharper, which is a kind of double whammy. This is a problem. And so basically, in addition to applying Bicubic, which is comparing neighboring pixels in order to figure out what the new pixels should be, and it's a smoothing process, essentially. On top of that, and that's destructive, by the way, there's just no two ways about it. When you're resampling, you are destroying the original pixels and replacing them with new ones. But it doesn't have to be this destructive. What's happening here is Photoshop is sharpening on top of the Bicubic interpolation. And you can actually see the sharpness, but let me show you the difference. Here's the good setting. Right here, Bicubic smooth gradients has nothing to do with smooth gradients. Not a darn thing. It should say smooth good detail, the end, Bicubic. And so see this little knot right here? I want you to notice it. I'm going to zoom in even more inside the dialog box. So we're viewing these pixels really magnified at 300%. So this is Bicubic smooth. Watch that knot. Watch this edge as well versus Bicubic sharper, which is the default setting. Notice the halos. It's generating halos by default. Yes, that is very bad news. And we've been kind of sold one on this by Adobe over time, and they're backing off. I think they're becoming wise that this is not the way to go, but we've been told by so many people at Adobe that this is great because after all, we're sharpening as we go. It's an automatic sharpening. No, you don't want to be generating halos. I mean, if you want to sharpen the image, go for it. This is basically the sharpen filter. That's about it. And so if you want to apply that, you apply that independently knowing what you're doing. Otherwise, you want to go with smooth gradients, right? So that gets you nice smooth detail, at which point I would click OK in order to accept that change. All right, it's a little bigger than that. I'm going to just go back to this slide right here for a second, and I'll return to the image menu and choose the image size command right here. This preview is no longer indicative for what I'm doing because this is object-oriented type. In other words, it's vector-based, so it's going to scale beautifully no matter what I do. But I want to show you what happens if I take this up to 200% and I change this guy to automatic. And let's locate, where is it right there? The 5 is kind of useful for our purposes right here. And I'll go ahead and zoom in. Once again, let's zoom into 300% so we can see what's going on here. If you set this to automatic, when you're upsampling, when you're inventing new pixels, it automatically switches to this. You used to switch to Bicubic smoother, which is a train wreck. I mean, it would smooth the detail, would blur the detail as you increase its size. So Bicubic plus a little tiny bit of blur. Whereas now it's preserved details, which isn't half bad. And that's okay. That's acceptable. However, notice, I want you to just see, let me zoom in just a little bit more to like 400%. See this edge right here, how it's haloing now? That's a function of preserved details. If you don't want any haloing, you would just go with Bicubic, and that would give you soft transitions, but they're also kind of gummy. That's just a function of, comparing the neighboring pixels. But what you want is not preserved details, which is old school. You want preserved details 2.0, which is better, which is the improvement. For some reason, automatic doesn't deign to select it automatically. And so notice the difference. Notice these sharply defined edges right here. A little bit of haloing, but not the kind of gummy haloing we have with preserved details. So if you want to upsample, go with preserved details 2.0. And then you have this reduced noise function and so forth, at which point I would click OK. Normally, this is not a flat image file, so it's going to scale beautifully because everything's vectors. All right, I'm canceling out. What I want to show you is this. If you want to, what should you be doing? In my opinion, this is just, if you believe me and the stuff I'm slinging, then press Control K or Command K on the Mac. Just do it. Control K, Command K on the Mac to bring up the preferences dialog box and change your overall image interpolation, your default interpolation here, not to nearest neighbors. That's just going to make the pixels bigger. That's great for screenshots. Bilinear is not bad. Actually, it's simpler. And it does give you very smooth transitions, the smoothest of them all. But generally speaking, what you want is a little bit of heft, which is what you get with Bicubic. Ignore the fact it says best for smooth gradients. Just pretend it's saying details, best for smooth details. Choose that and then click OK and go about your merry way. Actually, at this point, what I would do is quit Photoshop, either exit or quit. And that way you save your preferences so that that Bicubic interpolation moves forward. And that's why, even though it's pretty complicated, I do hate. It's more like I don't like, but it is destructive. So I guess I do hate Bicubic Automatic here inside Photoshop. At number 4, we have the Move tool. Well, really not the Move tool. I don't have any problems with that tool. It's great. But it's a problem when auto select. This one checkbox is turned on as it is nowadays by default. Bad idea, Adobe. And the weird thing about this is, for years and years, it's been with us for a long time, it was turned off by default, which I think is the right way to work. And then one day, it just got flipped on. And with no word of warning or anything, by the way. And so check it out. I'll go ahead and switch to the Move tool up here at the top of the toolbox. I have auto select turned off. That is not default behavior once again. But let's say what that means is things are predictable. I can select the title group, for example. I'll twirl it open so you can see number 4 is on one layer and then the Move tool stuff is on a different layer, but they're both part of this group. And that way, with the group selected, I can just drag any old place and I'll move those two layers together just as I want. However, if I turn auto select on, and by the way, this is default behavior, and there's various ways to invoke that, a couple of ways anyway, and that's to right click on this little tool icon on the far side of the options bar and choose Reset Tool. That's one way. Another way is, let's say you have a different tool selected, like the rectangular marquee. And this is a great feature for anybody who teaches Photoshop. You want to right click on this guy and choose Reset All Tools. And that way, anything you've done is just, reset, basically. And even if you switch to different tools, for example, switch to the smudge tool right here and the sponge tool right here, and you've adjusted a bunch of settings all over the place. Well, if you just want to get back to square one, you would go back to like the rectangular marquee tool is a good place, and watch those tools right there. I'll right click and choose Reset All Tools. Photoshop will alert me that this is happening. Click OK, and now notice these tools reset along with all their settings. And by the way, if I switch to the Move tool, now auto select is turned on, to which I say boo. And watch this. I'll twirl close title. So I want to be able to move those two guys together, but if I drag, watch that over there in the layers panel. If I drag right here, I twirled open the group, which I didn't want to do really. And I also moved just one layer because I auto selected it. And if I go back and say, no, I want to do the whole group, undo, right? And I drag in a different location, then I auto select this text and move it around, as well as twirl open the group if it weren't already. And then it gets more interesting. If I drag up here, for example, I end up dragging the background. So it's not really the background layer. You wouldn't drag that. The background item, that is, it's not a layer. This is a layer. It's an independent layer called black. And then if you drag in an empty area, watch what happens. I'm going to close this group right here. I want you to watch this. I create a marquee and I spin everything open like so that I've selected every single layer in this particular document, and then I drag it around. But if I drag in the wrong place, like over here, I start a new marquee and I select different layers and I drag them around, and holy heck, it's a mess very, very quickly. Now, you may like this option. You may find it to be a real time saver. If you're working in a multi-layer document and you want to be able to move layers around really quickly and select them just by clicking on that layer. But I'm of the opinion most people don't work that way. You will have to let me know, of course. But in any event, it's worth noting that it is selected by default and you're going to need to manually turn it off. And if I do now turn it off like so, and I press the F12 key in order to revert my document so it's back to normal, and I go to my rectangular marquee tool now, and I take advantage of that control key trick where you press and hold the control key or the command key on the Mac and you drag, I'm going to move the entire group because by golly, it's selected over here in the layers panel. So it's up to you whether you want auto select or you want to be able to move what you expect. At number 3, we have character and paragraph styles, which are so hopelessly broken. Oh my God, it's soul crushing because these could be useful features if they worked. They so don't work. I recommend you steer absolutely clear of them. And so I'll be demonstrating character styles, paragraph styles, same stuff basically. So I'll go to the window menu and choose character styles, which brings up this hopeful little panel right here. Looks like it's going to work just fine, doesn't it? And then I'll grab my type tool, which of course you can get by pressing the T key. I'm going to click after the T and kind of stay away from it. I'm just going to enter some additional characters. I don't know how you would pronounce this word, charactifier. Yeah, that's it. But I want you to see, I'll just select a few characters here. And I'll bring up the regular character panel, which is just fine. I want you to see that the type size is 120 points, as is the leading, and that this guy right here, standard ligatures are turned on, which means that this FI combines into a single character on the fly. It's really great. Anyway, now, of course, I just want to save it out as stay away from that. I want to save it out as a character style. And so I don't know, I can't remember whether I click on this guy right there. Let's say I do remember. And it brings up the dialog box, or it doesn't bring up the dialog box. So I'll click on it to select it, and it didn't bring up the dialog box, and that's not what I want. So I'll press Control Z, obviously, Command Z on the Mac. That switches back to none and puts a plus sign after it, which means there's a local override. And I'll do that again. I'm pressing Control Z over and over again, Command Z on the Mac. Notice up in the edit menu, the undo command is now dimmed. Now, this is really a problem. I'll emphasize this in just a moment, but okay, you know what? Fine. I'll just ignore that problem right there, and I'll get rid of it later. And I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on the plus sign, which works in Illustrator. Now, it didn't work, right? It just made a new style and it auto-named it. Now, I want to make this point clear because when this feature first debuted, it was a mess. I think it was the exact same mess it is now. I don't think it's gotten worse. It's just been this way. And I talked to the team. Really, really nice people, of course, and I just couldn't convince them. And they kept saying to me, we just modeled it after Illustrator. It works the same way as it does in Illustrator, which is a terrible answer because it doesn't work all that great in Illustrator. It doesn't work this badly. It works great in InDesign. That's where you want to model your character and paragraph styles. But whatever, it doesn't. It doesn't. And so now I have this other thing that's named wrong, and I can't undo it either. And I want to make it clear. Look, I'm at the end of my undos. They're gone. I'll bring up the history panel right here. Notice that I'm at the open state. This is not the open state. I have two more characters. I'll go back all the way to this thing before the open state. I still have these character styles sitting here, and they are part of this document. If I go to a different document, notice they're not there. I'm just polluting this document. They will be saved with it. I have an asterisk outside of the parentheses up here in the title tab, which tells me unsaved changes, and these are them. These will be saved. These infernal little beasts that I've created. Stay away from this feature. Go back from whence you came. This is me at the fork in the road telling you to turn around. But anyway, all right, you know what? I'm going to fiercely stick with it. The black layer is selected, so that's good. So I'm not going to ruin this text right away. But I'm going to double click on one of these guys to bring it up so I can see. Do you remember me telling you, OpenType features, that standard ligatures are turned on? No, not according to the style, they're not. Oh, by the way, this isn't 120-point text. This is 40-point text. 40 on 40 is what we got ourselves right here. And so I'll just go ahead and rename this white. It's white, right? Semi-bold, I know that. And it's 120 point last time I checked. And so I'll click OK. I'll click inside my text just to make sure, yes, it's 120 point. I can see that up in the options bar. I'll select some text just because character styles, just, the selected characters. And then I'll go ahead and apply this thing that I've created, this inhuman thing, this undead style. I'll click on it. And it's got a local override. That's what that plus sign means. Notice my text did not change at all because it's locally overridden by what? By what? I mean, if you can't click on a style to apply it, what in the heck do you do? Well, you have to drop down here. Do this. You should be able to alter option click on it to override the local override, but you click on this little thing. So you not only have to click on a style, you have to click on clear override, and that'll go ahead and apply the style right here, which is clearly 120 points. And then, if you don't have any text selected with the type tool, but the type layer is selected, then you just want to go ahead and format it, and it's got a local override as well. And then you have to click on the clear local override button in order to get it to work. And these styles are forever part of this document. You can't undo them. The only way to get rid of them is to go up to the file menu and choose revert, which reloads the image from disk. And that is why, good people, I recommend you stay away from the bad world of character and paragraph styles here inside an otherwise really great application, Photoshop. At number 2, on my list of 10 things I hate about Photoshop is the select and mask workspace. Now, I know a few of you are going to be shocked and appalled, and when I say a few, possibly most of you, because after all, select and mask is quite powerful. It's one of the most powerful features in the software, and it's arguably an essential part of masking. However, notice one important word here. I hate the workspace, not the feature, the workspace. It's, in my opinion, an example of just awful product design, and let me demonstrate. And so what I want to do is take this girl and set her against this Milky Way background. And so the first thing I need to do is select her by going up to the select menu and choosing the subject command, which you may recall was on my list of the top 10 things I love about Photoshop. And so I'll just go ahead and choose that command, and like a little miracle, it goes ahead and draws a selection outline around the subject of my photo. That is the girl herself. And now all I have to do is mask her. Now, in the olden days, this is a real good old days thing. And you can still bring it up by pressing the Shift key before you ever go to the select menu, and then keep that key down as you choose select and mask, and that'll bring up the perfectly fine refine edge dialog box. Notice how compact it is. Notice that it's non-modal, so I'm not trapped in a mode. Do you get the idea? So I could say, you know what? I want to check out those channels for a second and see how they're arranged. I might actually want to take a look at my histogram. You know, I can do that kind of stuff. But while I'm working, right? So I could say, well, you know what? I actually need to see this against layers, which is still possible. And all these features are still intact. And I'll crank up the radius value where the edge detection is concerned so that we have some better edges going on. I'm just asking Photoshop to reevaluate the edges. Apparently I have to go a little higher than that. And then I could adjust this value here and so forth. And then altogether, I just want you to see I have 6 slider bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They only take up not even half of the height of the screen. And then I could output whatever I do to a layer mask, right? And I'll switch back to the layers panel, and that would generate a layer mask for this particular layer. And then I'd click OK. Well, I'm going to click cancel because I'm going to show you now how it works. 6 slider bars. Just remember that. Cancel out. All right, now what you do is you just don't press the Shift key, right? You go up to the select menu and choose select a mask, or you can just click that button if it's up there in the options bar, if you have a selection tool active, and that takes you to the whopping modal select and mask workspace. It provides very little additional power where above and beyond that dialog box. It's just the dialog box options aren't supported anymore. So they're not getting updated. So any new technology is occurring in this big, huge, overpowering workspace that doesn't provide any clear advantage except you're trapped inside of it. I can't go to my panels and look at them. I just have this properties panel. It's a panel. Why is it a panel? It doesn't. Well, who cares if you move it around? It's not going to do you any good. It's just, that's what you got. That's all you got. How many slider bars do we have? Let's check. We got edge detection just as we did before. We got these 4. And then if I twirl open output settings, we got a 6th one. And yet somehow they take up not just the entire height of the screen. You have to scroll up and down to get to them. Do you see why I have a problem? Not with the feature, with the workspace. All this space up here is totally wasted. Most of we're looking at a preview instead of the image itself. What is the point of this except to go, wow, we made an entire workspace for this feature. It's largely wasted, and we spread out all the slider bars so you have to scroll up and down and so forth. You don't really get any nuance out of this thing except for here. This is the one clear advantage, refine hair. We got a button. And you got it. Okay, so you refine the hair. And then you click OK in order to accept what you've done. And I have now, I just modified the selection outline because I wasn't paying enough attention. All right, you know what? I'm going to undo that change and I'll go back. That's on me. That's on me, not Photoshop. And refine hair. I'll go ahead and click that button because I had to do all of this just to get back in here. And then I would probably make a change to the edge detection radius value. That's why this feature exists, is for this one value here, really, more or less. And then output to a layer mask and click OK. But this is, technically speaking, it's non-destructive in that I didn't hurt the image itself. However, it is destructive in that I made a pixel-based layer mask, and it's not nimble, right? It's not like I can edit it non-destructively somehow. It's still going to modify the pixels in the layer mask, and yet I had to work in that big, huge modal workspace, and that's just it. You want to tell me I'm arguing philosophy? That is fine. But once upon a time, all we had was this wonderful, very useful, non-modal dialog box. And now for the number one thing I hate most of all about Photoshop, and this one gives me no pleasure, frankly. This one breaks my heart. But that is misadventures in 3D. Photoshop really shot for the moon on this one. It was powerful as heck. And then Adobe announced that they were discontinuing all support for 3D, starting with Photoshop 22.2. That's the last version that officially supported it. I'm working in version 24.1, and it still works. I just created this text in 3D, by the way, just an hour ago or so. So you could still do it. Wouldn't recommend it, but it's still there because I guess, one day it's going to go away. But it used to be so amazing. I recorded 5 courses on this feature. Check it out. Every one of these I made from scratch in Photoshop. So extruded text that you could do this kind of stuff with. This is extruded in inflated text with a texture on it. Isn't that awesome? How about this? This is depth map, by the way. And then you could turn it into something that looked kind of hand-drawn. So there's just no end to the sort of effects you could integrate with your 3D imagery right here in Photoshop. This thing is less amazing, I think, but I drew it all with the shape tools. So this is all vector-based shapes, vector-based star, vector-based circles, and so forth. And I made this by importing a 3D model and then setting the focal plane on the eyes. So you could do stuff like that. This is so simple. Look at this. I'll turn off this layer. That's a shark layer on top of a photograph. That's all that's going on right there. And it's casting its own shadow. Look at that. Shadow casting is part of 3D in Photoshop. And you could set up entire scenes so these balls are reflecting each other and they're reflecting this guy. There's a photograph of a guy that's part of this composition, and I positioned him so he's behind you. That's what you're not getting reflected, but he is. And then it's just crazy. And the text is getting reflected as well. And then we have this. This is just painting me as an insane person because what I made this entirely from shape layers, absolutely 100% from scratch. The only photographic item is this reflected element in the camera lens. You can tell how long ago this was because this would have been a state-of-the-art camera at the time, 12 megapixels. Oh my goodness. But basically you had to ray trace. Everything is ray trace, by the way, which means it takes forever. This probably took more than half an hour back in the day. Anyway, so it kind of collapsed under its own weight. Adobe has a lot of other reasons. You can look at hardware reasons that they're not going to support 3D moving forward. But there were a lot of hiccups on the way. And just to give you a sense, here's an excerpt from an email I sent back in 2014 with a few recommendations about what they might want to do. And I stand by them. I wish they had taken them seriously. Rein back 3D and make it just plain work. We don't need all that stuff I showed you. I mean, I love doing it, but my goodness, it was just so much overhead for the program. What people want, right? You got 3D, dedicated 3D programs out there. And what people want is like extruded text. That's what they want. Just like, what we have in Illustrator right now, which works great. I like what they're doing in Illustrator a lot. Provide simpler, faster rendering options so it's not just ray tracing all the time. That's all you got is ray tracing. Fix the coordinate. Oh my God, this is me banging my head against the monitor or any other surface for that matter. Fix the coordinate and scale problems. To this day, I'm creating artwork with one set of values and watching those values shift the next time I open the file. Imagine every time you opened a Photoshop image with the drop shadow values were totally different. That's what it was. Everything just shifted all the time. They actually swapped the Y and Z axes at a point. It was crazy making. And then where is the origin point? I don't know. They don't know is what it came down to. But where is the darn origin point? How can you work in 3D if you don't know where everything starts? Let me set it. I want to set it. I really want to be able to drag it around. Maybe that's naive. I was told as much. And establish a scale and lock it down. Anyway, the response to my email was not favorable. I was told. I was told to mind my place is essentially what it came down to. But hey, water under the bridge a long time ago. Very nice people, by the way. No grudges held here. But I will say that Photoshop really shot for the moon with this one. And then, in a way that I haven't seen Adobe ever do, they massively dropped the ball. And that, my friends, is just a fact. What'd you think of my list? Agree? Disagree? What'd I miss? Comment down below. Feel free to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Now, the thing is, after all that hating, I still have one more. Would I say that I hate this one most of all? I might. To learn all about it, go to my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Deke now. Then go to Deke.com, create a free account, and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Deke Now.